Hi there, I am Stacy Phillips, and I am so excited to kick off my podcast, Stacy Phillips and Friends. Each week, we will step into my wardrobe, literally one of my closets, where one of my nearest and dearest friends and confidants will fill this chair next to me as my co-host to chat a little bit about life and a lot about women empowering women. Together, we will have a gap session with just us gal pals, a deep dive for the dish, a convo among co-eds, and then our big feature presentation, the special guest interview, or what I call the SGI. So welcome to Stacy Phillips and Friends. Let's keep it real. So here we are, our special guest interview, the SGI, Rabia Chaudry, the queen of podcasters. I think you put this on the map. I have a lot to learn from you. So welcome, Rabia. Love your story. Love how your story is a woman of action and how you took Adnan's journey and you gave him his life, for God's sakes. I don't know how to say it in any other way. Right, Deb?
Yes, absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I know you're an attorney like I am, but you've done so much more with your life. Not that I haven't done more with my life, but I don't mean to be self-effacing.
I couldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole, Stacy, but, I just ended up not at all doing what I expected I would do. I really wanted to be a filthy rich corporate lawyer. I'm still hoping for that, but at this age, I don't think it's going to work out anymore.
Well, we plan God laughs.
That's
and
right.
There's an expression that I taught Deb that I use a lot. It's a Yiddish expression. It's beshert, meant to be. You were meant to be doing what you're doing. And however you went to school, it was to give you the foundation to change people's lives. And frankly, I think that's much more important than being a filthy rich corporate lawyer. You can always do that. And anybody would be great to have you. So taking your law degree, immigration, civil rights, civic rights, which we wish had more of these days, defending Muslim immigrants, we need more of these days, against federal law enforcement agencies, which give me the heebie-jeebies, but that's me. And again, you're widely known for giving Adnan his life and his freedom, etc. So I'd like to learn more about it from the source. How did that come about that you were involved in that? And what did you learn in the beginning that made you or propelled you to do something?
Yeah, well, I have, like you said, we plan and God laughs. And I have, so much of my career has just been like kind of what was the calling of the moment. I was in law school. I think I was a first-year student when Adnan was arrested. And I knew Adnan because he was my younger brother's best friend. I knew him since he was like 12 years old. They were kids growing up in front of me. And, I was going to a law school in Northern Virginia. That's where I live. But I would visit my parents every weekend in Baltimore. And I will never forget. I would visit them. And I started seeing reports on the weekend news that this young girl named Hamin Lee was missing. Then a couple weeks later, I was there again in Baltimore, and I saw the news that her body had been found. And then more weeks passed by, and I will never forget it. I was laying on the sofa in my mom's living room, and the news comes up, and it says, there's been an arrest made in the murder of Hamin Lee. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And they said, 17-year-old Adnan Syed has been arrested. And they showed his picture, and I flew up out of the sofa. I'm like, what? And my parents live in the same neighborhood as Adnan's family. I said, what is, I had no idea there was any connection. I knew he went to the same school. I was absolutely horrified and astonished. My mother and I went immediately over to their home. It was evening, and nobody was opening the door, and it was just, that was just the beginning of 24 years. And when I like I said, I had known Adnan at that point, since he was a very little kid, and he was just the sweetest kid. And I was like, Adnan? I'm like, my brother has some other friends that I'd be like, well, I don't know about that guy, but Adnan, there's just no way. And then I started, I would visit him in prison, and I sat through the trials, and I'm, when you're in law school, you have a lot of ideals, like, the criminal justice system is like, it works right, and all the pieces fit in place, and there's due process. And then I got to see it firsthand before I even graduated, because I sat through his first trial, I sat through his second trial, And it was just watching a train wreck in slow motion. And the entire time he maintained his innocence, and I believed him. He got a very poor defense. His attorney was really ill, and she died not long after his trial. And it was just one thing after another. And then once this happened in front of me, he was convicted like a year later, I just couldn't walk away. And I said, okay, maybe the appellate system works. Maybe that'll help. The appellate system doesn't work either. You have maybe a 2% chance of having your conviction overturned on appeal. And so began 24 years of fighting to prove that he was wrongfully convicted and getting him out of prison. Wow. And that led us to Serial and the podcast and all that stuff. Yeah.
24 years.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. He's been out now it'll be 3 years in September. So that feels pretty good.
But isn't it still sort of in limbo?
It was. It's a very weird procedural history that is unprecedented as well. And, the charges were dropped against him 3 years ago. He was exonerated, charges dropped. And then the victim's family appealed and said, well, we didn't get a fair shot to be present at the hearing, that resulted in his conviction being vacated. Now, it was kind of a shot in the dark for them. This was not a tried method of keeping the case alive, but it worked. The appellate court did not dismiss their appeal. We really thought they would. They said, we're going to reinstate the conviction. We're going to reinstate the charges, which, as you know, Stacy, charges can only be brought by a prosecutor. They can't be brought by a court. But they did. They reinstated charges, which I have never heard of before. Then it went to the Supreme Court, and they said, yep, we're upholding the lower court's decision. We're going to send it back. And so anyhow, this limbo went on for like 2 more years. Finally, in February, it was put to rest. He was they did reinstate charges, but they said, we're going to give him time served, and we're going to let him go. He was a juvenile. So unfortunately, even though it's not a full exoneration, the conviction stands. He has gained his freedom, and he doesn't have to serve any more time. And for now, that's good enough. Although I do hope one day that we can fully exonerate him.
May I ask, besides the fact that you knew him, you knew his character,
Yeah.
what convinced you of his innocence?
Well, like I said, I sat through the trial, and I'm waiting in the trial for there to be actual evidence of his guilt, and it just didn't exist. There was no forensic evidence at all that connected him to the murder. None. And we're talking about this is not like a drive-by shooting. This is like a close-up strangulation, a manual strangulation. The body's been handled a lot. There should have been a lot of forensic evidence. There was forensic evidence gathered. The problem is none of it matched Adnan. Then you had one state's witness, and that was the only evidence. That state's witness said that, yeah, I helped him bury her. I helped him bury the body. Except that state's witness, his story changed at every trial, in every interrogation. It changed so many times, people lost track because he was just making it up. And the thing about that state's witness, and it's hard to blame him, is that he was one of Adnan's friends. He was a young, black, 19-year-old kid in Baltimore whose father was in prison, whose brother was in prison, and who was told by the white prosecutor that if you don't become state's witness, we are going to charge you with the murder. So he did what he could to protect himself, and he became state's witness. It was the first time in the state of Maryland that cell phone evidence was used to convict somebody, but the cell phone evidence never actually matched the testimony of the witness. Nothing worked. The state's case didn't work in any way. The autopsy report of the victim completely contradicted the state's theory of the crime, and so there's not a single box the state. But what the state was able to do, and it was a lesson I learned early on, was they were able to tell a better story in court. They were able to tell a good story, and the story they told was that this was a young Muslim man who, because he was rejected by this girl, they had dated for 6 months and then they had moved on. It was just a high school thing. They both were seeing other people at the time, but that because he was rejected, he honor killed her. Now, this was a real shock to the community. This is before 9/11. It's before we got the full gambit of people's hysteria around Muslims. And we didn't know what to do with that. And he was a 17-year-old kid who was born and raised in America. He had never been to Pakistan, where his family is from. But his ethnicity, religion, and nationality was brought up 300 times during the trial.
Wow.
That's unconscionable. but it's basically the state, because they cannot find a motive. They cannot find evidence. They're like, we got to make it about something about him. So they made it about his identity. And, they put witnesses on the stand. And, I'm just sitting there watching as a member of the Muslim community. They put witnesses on the stand, other like kids that went to school with him and went to the mosque with him, and asked them things like, well, how many times a day do you pray? And which way do you face when you pray? I mean, like, they just made us and him seem like such this alien, weird person that it just scared the jury. And when jurors were asked afterwards, they're like, yeah, we've heard that like Muslim men really batter their women. And that's what it became about. It was not about the evidence. So
You felt it an attack on the community.
it was 1,000% an attack on the community. When he had his bail hearing, and he's again 17 years old, no priors, and nothing since then, by the way, spotless record in prison, not a single act of violence has he ever committed. And he had 300 of us showed up at his bail hearing. 12 people put up their homes for his bail. There were business people, doctors, imam. I mean, like the creme de la creme of the community showed up to vouch for him. And what the prosecutor said at the bail hearing, she said, she turned around, she said, all these people in the courtroom, judge, these are the people who are going to help him escape. These are the people who are going to cover for his crimes. So instead of it being like something that worked to his advantage, having hundreds of people show up to vouch for him and put up millions of dollars for his bail, it was turned against us. That we're the people who are like going to cover up an honor killing and help him escape somewhere from the country.
So everybody became a criminal.
It was ugly.
Every innocent person who was there to support him became a criminal.
Pretty much. And then, the impact that had on the community was that it was terrifying for people. A lot of people, like he grew up with a lot of other kids in the community. Those kids suddenly disappeared. The parents didn't want them, want those kids involved. They're like, they'll come after you next and come after you. My mother was the only one in the community who said to me and to my brother, who was Adnan's best friend, no, we don't back down. We're going to see him in prison. This is bullshit. We're not getting scared by these people, and we're going to fight for them to the best we can.
In my research on him, as I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adnan made a phone call to a guy named Jay from his
Jay
cell
was
phone.
the state's witness, yeah.
Yes, and that was the only possibility that indicated that Adnan was not in the place that he said he was. Everything else just didn't match.
No, actually, even that doesn't contradict Adnan's story. Adnan has told the exact same sequence of events for 26 years now. He said, I called Jay that morning because Jay was his friend, and Jay was Adnan's very good friend's boyfriend. Adnan had a very good friend named Stephanie, and Jay was her boyfriend. So Adnan called Jay that morning. Jay would borrow Adnan's car. He said, Jay, if you want my car, it's Stephanie's birthday. Drop me off at school, and you can go to the mall and take my car. And so when the police got Adnan's phone records, they saw the very first call made in the morning was Jay. And Adnan said, yeah, I called him because he wanted to borrow the car to buy a gift for Stephanie. And then Jay had the car all day. So then the police went and found Jay. And they said, why'd you have the car all day? And then they harassed him until he finally said it was part of an elaborate plan to kill her. And then I was going to go pick him up from this Best Buy, and he was going to call me from a payphone. Nothing about any of this made sense, and none of it was true. And, to this day, the reason charges were finally dropped against him because the district attorney was like, we have done all the DNA. We have run all the DNA. None of the DNA matches Adnan. But they have DNA that matches somebody. The problem is the state refuses to take the next step to find the source of the DNA, of the hair that was found on her body, of the fingerprints found in her car. They just say, well, they weren't Adnan's, but we're going to stop there.
And her family isn't protesting and say, take it the next step?
No, the family has been told and believed that it was Adnan all along. And this is not uncommon. Look, Adnan's case was kind of my first wrongful conviction, my first innocence case, because it was so personal to me. But when it became such a public case, so many others have come to me. And me and my team, we've done 25 of these cases now, and 18 of our defendants are home. So what you see in each one of these cases is a similar pattern. You see no forensic evidence. You see a really bad witness whose story keeps changing. You see nothing matching up. And then you always see a victim's family that it's too painful for them to believe anything else. Because if they do, number one, not only do they get it wrong, it means the person who killed their loved one has been free all this time. So the victim's family always has a really hard time with exonerations.
And that says something about our prosecutors that they're not willing to take it the next step and find the truth, find justice. I mean, she deserves that.
Yeah, as
So
far as
does
they're
Adnan.
concerned is that the case is closed. They've got their conviction, it stands. And that's the complicated part. Like, listen, I've been working overtime even when Adnan got out. I have my investigator pulling trash, at 3 a.m. from suspect, from the curbs. So I've got all this like suspect DNA profiles. I got the profiles myself, but I have nothing to match them to because the DNA profiles that came off of the victim's shoes and clothing, the state has that. The state's crime lab has it. They will not give it to me. And they have no reason to give it to me.
So you've done 25 others and 19 are free.
18.
That's a better
18.
track record.
It
Better
is a
track
great
record
track
than-
record. And it's in 7 years. We managed to do that. And, it says something that we have a lot of innocence projects that come to us, people who do this full time. And when they are kind of at the end of their rope and say, look, we don't know where to go with this case. The problem is innocence projects, which are located in most American states, just kind of don't have the resources and funding to do the investigative work required to exonerate somebody. And we have been able to do that because our podcast supports the work, the sponsors support the work, and our listeners support the work. So it's pro bono for the defendants, and it doesn't cost the Innocence Projects anything.
Have you worked with any big firms? Because I know my law firm has helped in situations like this.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, in cases, sometimes the defendants that come to us are represented by big firms. And if they are, a lot of times the firms kind of don't want media involvement, which I completely understand. And we always respect that. We will not take a case unless the lawyers are on board. Sometimes we have had defendants come to us just writing to us from prison. They have no attorney, they have no representation, and we have helped get them representation with firms, with innocence projects. Mm-hmm. So it's been kind of a combination of things, but it is important, I think. Pro bono work is an ethical obligation of all attorneys, and a lot of the big firms do a lot of pro bono work, but I don't know how many of them focus any of those resources towards like wrongful convictions or innocence work.
What else do you do to make the world a better place?
What do I do? Look, I was in law school at just a lot was happening, let's just say. 9/11 happened when I was in law school. And that's actually what derailed my plans to become a rich corporate attorney, because that's what I wanted to do. But when 9/11 happened and suddenly just people started disappearing out of our community and the Department of Homeland Security came about and our civil rights were infringed on. And basically, frankly, we didn't have a whole lot of lawyers in our community. Most of the kids I grew up with went to med school. It's like 25%. I think the medical force in this country is like Pakistani or Indian. So they were all in med school, and I was one of the only lonely lawyers. So I had a lot of work, and my life just got busy doing a lot of immigration work and civil rights work, and then the criminal justice work came in with the non. And what was interesting to me was to see how over the years, like people don't naturally think there's a connection between immigration, national security, civil rights, all these things. They feel like they're in different buckets, but they're so deeply connected in so many ways, because administrations will come in and they'll use immigration as a hammer, right? Like
like what we're seeing
As a
now. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, what we're seeing now, what we've seen in previous, in 2016 as well. It's the first act of the 45th president was the Muslim ban, and so it's even though I didn't expect that all these different buckets of work that I was doing would connect so deeply, it has proven that they're inextricable. So that work has kept me busy in many ways, and I have taken a step back from doing federal. I couldn't do the innocence work and the immigration civil rights work. I had to pick one. And when Serial exploded and Adnan's case got so much attention, I realized this is the momentum I have to lean into, or otherwise he's never getting out of prison. And so Serial came out in 2014, and it took another 8-9 years to get him out. So that's the decision I made. But other than that, I'm a mom. I have a second book called Fatty Fatty Boom Boom, in which I talk about my weight loss, my weight journey of 40 odd years and losing 100 pounds and loving food and all that good stuff. I garden a lot.
Before we talk about that, I just want to tell you why this resonates with me so much. You may not know, I'm the chair of Public Counsel, which is the largest nonprofit law firm in the world. And we do a lot of work with immigrants,
I'm sure.
certainly social justice, and it warms my heart to hear what you've done. So
Thank
that's
you.
just
And
who I am.
What you do is
But-
great too. Look, it is heartbreaking right now. Not now, but just like in the last 10 years, just seeing so much progress that was made undone in so many different areas, and just us and there's just so much fear in immigrant communities right now. And I let my license go inactive a few years ago because I'm not directly representing any of these defendants. But after the last election, then the very next week I made it active again. I said, just in case. But I'm also an immigrant, and I wasn't born here. I was 6, 7 months old when my parents came here, and I was naturalized. And I recognized that I could be denaturalized and also removed from the country.
I can't imagine it happening in any other circumstance.
I mean, I feel a little bit like we were those frogs that were on the low flame. There were canaries in the coal mine decades ago saying the pendulum swings both ways further and further, right? Like the left is getting more left, but the right is getting more right. Like we have to keep an eye on both sides of that pendulum, and we kind of didn't, and so here we are.
And look where we're at.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Fatty Fatty Boom 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 and your journey on that.
Sure.
100 pounds, that's huge. I mean, you're not a big person.
I mean, no, right now I'm in a good place. I'm in a happy place. But after Adnan's story came out, it was pretty successful. There was an HBO documentary that was optioned from it, and my publisher immediately is like, "What are you going to write next?" And I said, "I don't know what I want." And they said, "You want to do a memoir?" And I thought, I don't have it in me to talk more about like civil rights and immigration and all this stuff, right? It's just so heavy. And Adnan's story was also a very heavy book. And I said, how about I write about something that I never talk about, which is like my personal struggle with weight and loving food. I cook a lot. I can cook for like 200 people myself. But I have always had a weight issue, and it's been a real challenge in how I was treated in my family, how I was treated in my first marriage. I kind of did it all. I had gastric sleeve surgery. I had a tummy tuck. There's no diet I hadn't done. There's no kind of workout I hadn't done. And it wasn't until I got to a place where I was like, oh my God, so much of what we're told is such just lies. Like the food we're being fed is poison, and this is a battle that people who struggle with this issue, especially women over like 40, I would say, we're set up to lose, and then we're made to feel like losers. Like it's all about willpower. We're not taught about metabolic disease. We're not taught that strength training is really important, and strength training is what changed my whole life and my body and everything.
How did you change your trajectory and lose the weight? Since I haven't read the book yet, I just love the title.
Oh, well, the title is one of my many nicknames from childhood. I had a cousin call me Fatty Fatty Boom Boom. I had a lot of very kind of mean-spirited nicknames. But what changed my trajectory in terms of all of this was, the struggle is similar to what most people go through. You lose 10 pounds, you gain 20. You lose 20, you gain 40. It's just nonstop. And what happened was the HBO documentary was going to premiere. And I knew, and I was already suffering for a couple of years with people taking pictures and tagging me on social media, and I'm not even being able to look at myself. And I gained a lot of weight because I was under so much stress with the case and Serial and the publicity. There's so much media. They spoofed the whole thing on Saturday Night Live. It just became a beast with its own life. And this HBO documentary was coming out, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to do like the media stuff and all the, and I said, I can't do it. So I never had a personal trainer, and I went to a personal trainer and I said, I have 6 months to lose like 25, 30 pounds. Please help me. I can't. And they're like, well, what do you normally do? And I said, well, I mean, I run a lot. I run like 5 miles a day. They're like, well, forget about that. You're not doing cardio. They're like, 6 days a week, you're going to come in and do strength training. And I was like, strength training? That's not good. I got to like Jane Fonda this out. This is not going to work. And they said, no, we just listen to us and just do what we're telling you. You don't have to cut your calories. Just eat good food, eat as much as you want. In fact, they maybe increased my calories because I was eating very low calorie, but my weight wasn't budging. And in 4 months, I lost 40 pounds, and I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And this was in my mid 40s. I'm 50. I'm almost 51, and I thought at this age I'll never be able to lose the weight because they tell you after 30, forget about it, right? So I couldn't.
How long
believe
did you carry it?
How long did I carry? I was heavy my entire life. So
Okay.
let's see. I finally started strength training like 6-7 years ago. So up until I was like 42, 43. Yeah.
So since a little girl,
45
you were...
actually. No, 45, 46. It was after I had a surprise pregnancy at 44. So I was like 46 years I carried that weight. So.
And you just worked out really hard in strength training 6 days a week?
I just turned off my brain and I said, I will trust you, trainer, and I'll do what you say. And it worked, and I couldn't believe it. And, but then COVID hit, and I put on a little, but it wasn't like, I put on a little weight, but it wasn't like the bounce back weight that you get if you go on a keto diet or you do something really restrictive. Mm-hmm. In 18 months, maybe I gained back 10 pounds instead of like 50, which I normally would have done. And that wasn't a big deal. Like 10 pounds, and when you have a lot of muscle, you've gotten smaller, so it doesn't show as much. And I've been kind of evangelizing to all my friends and any woman over like 40, please pick up weights, just get off the treadmill.
And is that how you continue to lose the other 60 and maintain your weight?
Yeah, well, no. So the 40 came at the end. It was a process. Before that, I had gotten gastric sleeve surgery in 2015, but I only lost 30 pounds, and then I ended up pregnant, and then I didn't lose another pound. So I lost 30 pounds that way. Then I lost 40 pounds with strength training, and the last 30 pounds.
And then I had working out.
After losing 70 pounds, I had a tummy tuck, and I write about that in the book too. Yeah, so.
And you've kept your weight off by strength training?
Yeah, strength training, and just I haven't dieted in 5-6 years because dieting really works against you. I kind of just make better choices. I'll still have chips and chocolate and French fries when I feel like it. I made a late night run I think I made an 11 p.m. run last night to Taco Bell to get me some nacho fries because sometimes you have to. So yeah, I mean, the deprivation doesn't help. It doesn't help. You have to you got to enjoy your life too. So, but yeah, I am in the gym. If anybody follows me on Instagram, you'll see every so often I'll post, and I'm proud of what my body can do at this age because I couldn't do this 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
I was just saying that the book has marvelous reviews, and I can't wait to read it.
I would love to send you both signed copies.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
We'll both read it.
Because as you age, it does get more difficult to manage one's weight.
Yeah.
And there are
a lot of women. There are a lot of people who struggle with it their whole life. But I will say this: it's a 2-day read. It's not a heavy read. It's not a depressing read. It's a funny read. There's a lot of recipes in it because I cook a lot, and it's also kind of a love letter to my culture and my country and all the food I love to eat. And my editor was just like, Rabia, I don't know, you don't want to put recipes in a book about weight. And I said, yeah, you do. Fat people like to eat. What are you talking about? Yeah, you got to do that. You got to do that.
So, being Jewish, I resonate with your work on the Inter-Jewish Muslim Alliance and the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council. Can you tell our listeners, our watchers, about that?
Yeah, sure. My parents came to the U.S. in the 70s, and they immediately kind of found a bit of an immigrant community, but also an interfaith community. My dad's best friend from Pakistan, from childhood, is from Pakistan, but he's Christian. And the first person to give my father a job in the United States was a Jewish doctor in his veterinary clinic. And, some of our closest friends in our social circle were Sikhs and Hindus from India. And so I just grew up in this very multi-faith, multicultural kind of upbringing. And so being connected to other faith traditions was always very important to me. And then as an adult, these particular communities, as we know, as is obvious from what we're seeing in the world, there's so much miscommunication, misinformation, a lot of grief between Muslim and Jewish communities that I've really wanted to focus my efforts on bringing our communities together, on exploring. I was a fellow with the Shalom Hartman Institute, which is an Israeli institute, and I went to Jerusalem and I studied Torah in rabbinical study. I wanted to understand And I wanted to pass on an understanding of what we believe and how our religions connect, because they are deeply connected.
I always say you're cousins.
100%.
It's yeah.
So much of like what we would learn, we're like, oh yeah, that's in the Quran too. Oh yeah, we believe that too. Oh yeah, we bury our dead before the sun goes down too. Oh yeah, no pork for us too. I mean, like it goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of similar struggles in our communities, whether it's women having struggles getting like, with the patriarchy in our institutional or, faith spaces. There's just a lot of ways that we can support each other and work together. And there's, on the issue of civil rights and human rights in the U.S., Muslim and Jewish communities have always worked well together. When the Muslim ban took place, the very first people to show up at the airports to help with that were Jewish organizations and speak out. So I'm a founding member of 2 national Muslim Jewish organizations, which in the last couple of years have been struggling, obviously. These are hard times for us to sit in a room and be together. And I've done a lot of work that has, frankly, gotten me ostracized from my own Muslim community. But I believe in it, and I stand by it, and I would do it again.
I've heard stories from my friend Mike Fuhrer when he was city attorney, going to the airport with the Muslim ban and dealing with it on the front lines.
Yeah.
And he's Jewish.
Yeah, that's what I said.
He was in that role, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah, American Jews have been incredible allies to us. Yeah.
I remember going to a lecture of 3 women. I remember one was Muslim, one was Jewish, and I don't remember what the third one was. And their friendship and how they met to try to break down barriers. And I just remember having tears in my eyes listening to them. My recollection is this was after 9/11, and with the hatred, whether you're
you might
Jewish,
be talking about
you're Muslim.
After 9/11, there was an organization that came up, and it was only for women. It was Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women, called Sisterhood of Salam Shalom. So maybe it was one of their events. They're a fantastic organization.
So why don't you tell her a little bit about Project Sam?
Well, Project Sam is a global initiative that uses football, soccer, to foster connection and show that we're more alike than we're different. It highlights that, we're cousins. Right. As I said before, we were in Palestine and Israel just weeks before October 7th.
Wow. Okay.
Bringing Israeli and Palestinian kids together through sport. And you could hardly tell the difference between one or the other.
That's wonderful.
It is, it's beautiful work. It's the most rewarding of anything that I've done.
That's amazing.
So you've been to the Holy Land, as my boyfriend who's Catholic calls it, and I'm Jewish, and it's everybody's Holy Land.
It's everyone's. Yeah. Yes, it is.
And we have to remember that.
I do. The truth is this. I mean, this is I wish I didn't have to say this, but after being there a couple of times, I felt like, it felt unholy. It felt unholy because there was just so much. You could feel a lot of tension between people. And it was like Muslims and Jews were living amongst each other, but just completely separate lives, walking past each other, nobody talking. And it was just kind of heartbreaking to me. It's an incredible, haunting place. I went to the Church of the Nativity. I went to the Tomb of the Patriarchs. We did all of it. But it was just hard to separate from everything else happening around it. It was hard to separate the sacred
distance,
from the profane.
The feeling of distrust.
Invisible walls.
It just and it felt tense all the time. Everything always felt tense. And it's a tense place. It's a high energy tense place, really, for a lot of reasons. But I
didn't feel that, but I can appreciate that you did.
So, Rabia, what's next for you? What's next for you work-wise? What's next for you passion-wise? What's next for you project-wise or podcast-wise?
So my podcast is called Undisclosed, and that's the vehicle we used, to do our Innocence work. We have been on hiatus for 3 years for a lot of different reasons, and a lot of them relating to personal things. My father, I took care of him, and now I'm taking care of my mother in her final journey. But yeah, we are relaunching Undisclosed, and we have lots of cases. And, unfortunately, we have lots of cases. They kind of never end. So the Innocence work, I think, is really going to be the core of my work going forward. And it's always going to be connected to media, because that's been the vehicle that works for us in this model.
Thank you. Yeah. So when are you planning to come out to L.A.?
Oh, gosh, I would love to. Right now I have put most of my travel on hold because of my mom, and I did not want to. I'm doing what I did with my dad, which is give her hospice care at home. So it's hard. I don't have a full-time caretaker. I am the caretaker, and so I put a kind of travel on hold. But I'll be honest, I would love to meet you.
Please. So,
Well, this has been great.
and thank you, both of you. So, those listening, please join me in thanking Rabia and Deb, my dear friend, and now my new friend. Join us again here at youtube.com at Stacy D. Phillips Esque, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Stacy D. Phillips Esque. We will include links for Rabia and Deb the episode, but please just share what yours are now for those listening. Rabia?
Oh, yeah. So you can find more about my work or contact me through my website. It's rabiachaudry.com. I'm on Instagram at Rabia2. It's spelled out, squared 2. Don't ask it. It was hard to get a handle. And then I'm on just my name on Facebook, Rabia Chaudry on Facebook.
And Deb?
Okay, and I am Deborah Martin with an H. Deborah is my Instagram, and that's my main social media. I'll be looking for you, Rabia.
I'll be looking for you.
Ditto. So
See you
you've been
guys
listening to Stacy Phillips and Friends, where love is always in fashion.
Oh, that's so cute.